The sound of my son's credit card being declined echoed through the upscale restaurant like a gunshot. Calvin's face drained of color as the waiter leaned in, whispering that awful phrase no diner wants to hear. "I'm sorry, sir. Your card has been declined." My 32-year-old son shot me a desperate look across the white tablecloth, his eyes wide with panic. The $650 bill sat between us like an unexploded bomb. Calvin's confident smile, the one he'd been flashing all evening while ordering expensive wine and lobster, vanished in an instant. "Mom," he whispered urgently, "please tell me you brought your card." I nodded slowly, reaching into my purse with trembling fingers. The gold card I pulled out gleamed under the chandelier lights. Calvin's shoulders relaxed visibly as he reached for it. But what my son didn't know was that 15 minutes earlier, while supposedly powdering my nose in the ladies' room, I had frozen that very card through my banking app. "Try this one," I said, sliding it across the table, my heart pounding so hard I was certain everyone could hear it. Time seemed to slow as the waiter took my card and disappeared. Calvin winked at me, already regaining his swagger. "Thanks, Ma. I'll pay you back next week when my check clears." Another lie. I'd heard that promise 50 times before. When the waiter returned, his expression told the whole story before he even opened his mouth. "I'm afraid this card has been declined as well." The look on my son's face, confusion melting into realization, then hardening into betrayal, will stay with me forever. In that moment, 30 years of enabling crashed down around us both. But let me back up 3 days to show you how we got here. You think you know where this is going? Wait until you see what happened next. This isn't just about a dinner bill, it's about what happens when a mother's love finally reaches its breaking point. My name is Lorraine Harris. I turned 58 last month, and for 32 years of that life, I've been a mother. Before retirement, I worked as a nurse at Memorial Hospital in Atlanta. Night shifts, double shifts, holiday shifts, whatever it took to keep a roof over our heads after my husband Thomas died. Cancer took him quickly when Calvin was just 22 and Denise was 26. Nursing taught me how to care for people, how to heal wounds, how to ease suffering. But the hardest patient I ever had wasn't in any hospital bed. He was sleeping in the bedroom across the hall from mine. "Mom, I just need a little help until next Friday." That was Calvin's most common phrase, usually followed by an exact dollar amount. Sometimes $50 for gas. Sometimes $800 for rent. Once, $2,300 for a music production opportunity that mysteriously vanished along with the money. I still remember the day he got his first job at 17, bagging groceries at the local supermarket. He was so proud, strutting around in that green apron. 3 weeks later, he quit because his manager didn't respect his vision. That became the pattern, brief employment followed by grand excuses. "You can't keep rescuing him," my daughter Denise would tell me during our Sunday phone calls. "He's a grown man, not a child. You're retired now, Mom. Your savings won't last forever." Denise had always been the practical one. College scholarship, accounting degree, married to her high school sweetheart with 2 beautiful children and a house they actually owned, not rented. She managed her money carefully, called me twice a week, and visited monthly with homemade casseroles that would last me days. "I know," I'd tell her, stirring my tea. "But what am I supposed to do? Let him go homeless? He's your brother." "And he knows exactly how to play you," she'd counter, her voice gentle but firm. "Remember when he sold your wedding china to start his business? Or when he borrowed your car and returned it with an empty tank and a dent? Or when he used your credit card to buy those expensive headphones without asking?" I remembered it all. The small betrayals that accumulated like dust on a shelf nobody bothers to clean. Yet whenever Calvin called, sounding desperate or excited about some new venture, my heart would soften and my wallet would open. Last Christmas, I gave him $5,000 to help with a deposit on an apartment. This is the last time, I told him firmly, watching his eyes light up as he counted the bills. I'm serious, Calvin. I'm dipping into my retirement now. Mom, you're an angel, he said, hugging me tight. This is the turning point. You'll see. By next Christmas, I'll be paying you back double. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. Isn't that what mothers do? We see the best in our children, even when everyone else has given up. 2 months later, he called asking for money to fix his car. When I hesitated, he grew angry. Fine, I guess I'll just lose my job then, he snapped. Is that what you want? For me to fail? I sent him $600 that day. The next week, I saw photos on his social media of a new gaming system and expensive sneakers. My retirement account dwindled while my credit card debt grew. I started taking the bus instead of driving to save on gas. Cancelled my cable subscription. Began shopping at discount grocery stores. All while Calvin posted pictures from clubs and restaurants, always dressed in the latest fashions. He's draining you dry, Denise warned during one of her visits, watching me cut coupons at my kitchen table. Mom, you need to set boundaries before there's nothing left. That night, I cried myself to sleep, feeling trapped between a mother's love and a fool's hope. The next morning, I found 3 unauthorized charges on my credit card, all from online stores Calvin frequented. When confronted, he claimed it was a mistake, that he'd accidentally used my card instead of his. Another lie. Another disappointment. Another withdrawal from the bank of Mom. Have you ever loved someone who kept taking advantage of your kindness? Drop a heart if you felt this pain. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we'd give everything to protect. The call came on a Wednesday evening. I was watering my peace lily, the one Thomas had given me on our 15th anniversary, when my phone lit up with Calvin's smiling face. The sight still made my heart skip a beat, just like when he was a little boy. Hey Ma, his voice had that silky smooth quality it only got when he wanted something. I braced myself for the request that would surely follow. But instead, you busy Saturday night? Thought we could have dinner together. Just you and me. My watering can froze mid-pour. Calvin hadn't initiated dinner in. I couldn't even remember how long. Usually, it was me begging him to come over, promising his favorite meatloaf, just to see his face for an hour. Dinner. I repeated, unable to hide my surprise. Yeah, he chuckled. Don't sound so shocked. Can't a son take his mother out? Been too long since we had quality time. Something in his voice sounded rehearsed, but hope bloomed in my chest anyway. Maybe Denise was wrong. Maybe he was finally maturing, finally seeing that his mother was getting older, that our time together was precious. That sounds lovely, I said, setting down the watering can. What were you thinking? A slight pause. There's this new place downtown. The Crystal Room. Real fancy steakhouse. Figured we could treat ourselves. The first red flag unfurled itself. Calvin never suggested expensive restaurants, not unless someone else was paying. And treat ourselves was suspiciously vague about who'd be covering the bill. That sounds expensive, I ventured carefully. Ma, don't worry about that, he said quickly, the silky smoothness returning. I just closed a deal with this local rapper. Got a nice advance. Let me spoil you a little. Second red flag. These deals never materialized into actual money. Last time, it was a collaboration with a famous producer that needed a $500 investment from me. Before that, a merchandising opportunity that required $1,200 for initial inventory that never arrived. But I wanted to believe him. Lord, how I wanted to. Well, that's wonderful news about your deal, I said. What time should I be ready? I'll pick you up at 7, he said. Wear something nice. As if I owned anything that wasn't at least 10 years old. After we hung up, I sat on my couch, phone still in hand, caught between suspicion and a mother's endless hope. Was this another manipulation? Or was my son finally seeing me as more than an ATM with unconditional love? I spent the next 3 days in a state of nervous anticipation. I pulled my best dress from the back of my closet, navy blue with subtle beading around the neckline. I'd worn it to Thomas's funeral and hadn't touched it since. Too many memories. But it was the nicest thing I owned. Friday night, I hand-washed it in the sink, careful not to damage the delicate beadwork. As I hung it to dry in my bathroom, I felt silly for being so excited about dinner with my own child, like a teenager preparing for a first date. Saturday morning, I went to the salon down the street, a luxury I rarely allowed myself. $25 for a wash and set, plus a $5 tip I could barely afford. The stylist, a young woman with kind eyes, arranged my silver-streaked hair in soft waves that made me look almost pretty. "Hot date tonight?" she asked with a wink. "Dinner with my son," I replied, feeling a flush of pride. I spent the afternoon applying makeup I rarely used, painting my nails a soft pink, and even digging out the pearl earrings Thomas had given me for our 20th anniversary. I wanted to look nice for Calvin. I wanted him to see that his mother still had dignity, despite the financial struggles I tried to hide. At 6:45, I was ready, purse clutched in nervous hands, perfume dabbed behind my ears. If I had checked my account that morning, everything would have changed. But I didn't. And that simple oversight set us on a collision course that would either break us apart forever or finally force my son to become the man I always believed he could be. Calvin arrived at 7:15, not quite late enough to complain about, but just late enough to make me check my watch twice. He pulled up in a car I didn't recognize, sleek and black with tinted windows. "You like it?" he asked, noticing my surprise as I locked my front door. "Buddy of mine let me borrow it for tonight. Said I should roll up in style." Another piece that didn't quite fit. Calvin rarely had friends generous enough to loan expensive cars. "You look nice, Ma," he said, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek. His cologne was overpowering, almost masking another scent beneath, nervousness perhaps. I'd smelled it on patients before surgeries. Downtown Atlanta glittered as we drove, skyscrapers lit up against the night sky. Calvin kept talking about his latest project, words tumbling out too quickly. "This rapper, he's the next big thing. Got connections to all the major labels. Said my beats were the best he'd heard in years. Advance check is just the beginning." I nodded, smiling, but my stomach tightened. The more detailed his success stories, the less likely they were to be true. That was another pattern I'd learned over the years. The crystal room lived up to its name. Chandeliers caught the light and scattered it across white tablecloths. Well-dressed waiters moved silently between tables. The host checked Calvin's reservation, he'd actually made one, and led us to a table near the center of the room. "Only the best for you tonight," Calvin said, pulling out my chair with a flourish. The menus had no prices, but I knew what that meant. When the waiter appeared, Calvin ordered without hesitation. "We'll start with the seafood tower. And a bottle of the Cristal." I nearly choked. "Calvin, champagne is perfect for celebrating," he interrupted smoothly. "And 2 filet mignons, medium rare. Truffle mashed potatoes and asparagus on the side." The waiter nodded approvingly. "Excellent choice, sir." As he walked away, I leaned forward. "Calvin, this is too much. We could have gone somewhere more reasonable." He waved dismissively. "Ma, I told you. I got this. My career is finally taking off. In fact." He lowered his voice conspiratorially. "I might be signing with a major label next month." They're flying me to New York to meet the executives. A memory surfaced. Calvin at 14, telling his teacher he couldn't turn in his homework because our dog ate it. We never had a dog. The champagne arrived, golden bubbles dancing in crystal flutes. Calvin raised his glass. To success. And to the woman who never stopped believing in me. Guilt washed over me as I sipped the expensive champagne. Had I been wrong? Was this the turning point? The seafood tower arrived, a mountainous display of lobster, crab, and shrimp on ice. Calvin dug in enthusiastically, talking between bites about producers and contracts and six-figure advances. But then the inconsistencies began. The label's based in Los Angeles, he said at one point. 20 minutes later, the New York office handles all the new artists. I'm meeting them next Tuesday. Then, forgetting his earlier statement, the meeting's set for the first week of next month. With each slip, the knot in my stomach tightened. Our steaks arrived, perfectly cooked and topped with herb butter that melted into pools of richness. Calvin ordered another bottle of wine. The Camus Cabernet, 2015, without consulting me. I barely tasted my food, watching my son perform for me, for the waiter, for anyone watching. The act of a successful man treating his mother to dinner. But it was just that, an act. When the dessert menu came, I shook my head. I'm quite full, dear. Nonsense, Calvin insisted. 2 chocolate soufflés. And 2 glasses of that dessert wine, the one from Hungary. The waiter left, and I placed my hand on Calvin's. Son, who's paying for all this? His smile faltered for a split second. I told you, Ma. I got this. Because this meal is very expensive, I continued gently. I just want to be sure. Are you seriously questioning me right now? His voice hardened. Can't you just enjoy the night without counting pennies for once? The words stung, but before I could respond, the waiter appeared with a leather folder. Whenever you're ready, sir, he said, placing the bill discreetly beside Calvin. Calvin didn't reach for it. He continued talking about his bright future, his voice slightly louder than before. I watched the folder sit untouched for 5, then 10 minutes. Finally, he pushed it toward me. Ma, slight problem. The advance is pending in my account until Monday. Mind covering tonight? I'll pay you back double next week. I opened the folder. $647.82. More than half my monthly Social Security check. You told me you were paying, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You invited me. You ordered all this expensive food. Come on, it's not a big deal. His charming smile returned. You know I'm good for it. What I did next, I had never done before. Would you have the courage to teach your child this lesson? Comment yes or no. Excuse me, I said, clutching my purse. I need to use the ladies' room. Calvin nodded, already scrolling through his phone as if the bill wasn't sitting there like a ticking bomb between us. In the elegant bathroom with its marble counters and fresh flowers, I locked myself in a stall and leaned against the door, breathing hard. 32 years of these moments. 32 years of Calvin taking, promising, disappointing. My hands trembled as I opened my purse and pulled out my phone. The banking app icon stared back at me, innocent and blue. What kind of mother considers doing this to her son? I thought of Denise's warnings. Of my dwindling savings. Of the electricity bill I'd barely managed to pay last month. Of Calvin's designer watch that probably cost more than my monthly income. And something inside me, something that had bent and bent and bent for years, finally snapped. 3 taps on my phone. That's all it took to freeze my debit card. A simple security feature for lost cards, now weaponized by a desperate mother. The confirmation message appeared. Your card has been temporarily frozen. No charges can be processed until you unfreeze it. I stared at those words, hardly believing what I'd done. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain the women touching up their makeup outside could hear it. Was this tough love or cruel punishment? Was I teaching a lesson or breaking what remained of our fragile relationship? I splashed cold water on my face, reapplied my lipstick with unsteady hands, and straightened my shoulders. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't back down. Not this time. When I returned to the table, Calvin had ordered coffee. More expense on a bill he had no intention of paying. "Everything okay?" he asked, barely glancing up. "Fine," I lied, sitting down. My debit card felt like a lead weight in my wallet. Calvin signaled the waiter. "We're ready for the check now." The young man appeared instantly. "Of course, sir. How will you be paying tonight?" My son reached for his wallet with confident flourish, extracting a sleek black card that looked suspiciously new. "This should cover it," he said with that practiced smile. I watched in silence, heart hammering against my ribs, as the waiter took the card and walked away. Calvin winked at me across the table. "See? Told you I had it handled." 3 minutes of false security. That's all he got before the waiter returned, leaning down to whisper something in Calvin's ear. "What do you mean, declined?" Calvin's voice rose slightly. "Run it again." The waiter nodded apologetically and retreated. Nearby diners glanced our way. "Technical glitch," Calvin assured me, his confident facade cracking just slightly. "Happens all the time with these high-limit cards." The waiter's second return told the whole story before he even spoke. "I'm sorry, sir. The card was declined again." Calvin's expression shifted from confidence to confusion to barely concealed panic in the span of seconds. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he fumbled through his wallet, producing another card that looked even less legitimate than the first. "Try this one," he said, voice tighter now. Another decline. Then another. With each failed attempt, Calvin's composure crumbled further. Other diners were openly staring now, whispers passing between tables. The manager appeared behind our waiter, his expression professionally neutral but eyes sharp with suspicion. "Perhaps your mother might assist," the waiter suggested delicately. Calvin turned to me, eyes pleading. "Ma, please. This is embarrassing. Just put it on your card, and we'll sort it out later." With trembling fingers, I removed my frozen card and passed it to the waiter, maintaining eye contact with my son. The confidence had drained from his face, replaced by the desperate look of a drowning man spotting a life raft. The waiter took my card and disappeared. "Thanks, Ma." Calvin's shoulders relaxed. "Like I said, I'll pay you back Monday. Double." I said nothing, watching the door where the waiter would reappear. When he did, his expression confirmed what I already knew. "I'm very sorry, ma'am. This card has also been declined." Calvin's face transformed before my eyes. Confusion, then shock, then the dawning horror of realization. "Mom," he whispered fiercely, leaning across the table. "What did you do?" But his reaction later that night was just the beginning. Family battles can turn ugly in seconds. Subscribe so you're prepared for what comes next. "Sir, if you can't pay your bill, we have limited options," the manager said, his voice low but firm. "We can call the authorities, or—" Calvin's eyes widened. "Or what?" "Some of our customers in similar situations have worked off their debt in our kitchen." The humiliation on my son's face should have given me satisfaction. Instead, it pierced my heart like a knife. But I stayed silent, hands folded in my lap, watching the consequences unfold. "You want me to wash dishes?" Calvin hissed, glancing around at nearby tables. "Like some kind of It would settle your debt without involving the police, the manager interrupted smoothly. Your choice, sir. Calvin stared at me, waiting for me to rescue him, to unfreeze my card with a few taps on my phone, to make this nightmare disappear like I'd done so many times before. I met his gaze without flinching. You invited me to dinner, Calvin. You ordered everything on this table. You knew you couldn't pay. So this is what? A lesson. His voice cracked with disbelief. If that's what you need it to be. 20 minutes later, I watched my 32-year-old son, the boy I'd nursed through chickenpox and driven to basketball practice, the teenager I'd bailed out of jail after his first DUI, the man who still came to me whenever life got hard, being led through swinging doors into the restaurant kitchen. He'd removed his expensive jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and followed the manager with the stiff posture of a condemned man. Just before disappearing, he looked back at me, his expression a mixture of embarrassment and fury that made my chest ache. I sat alone at our table, finishing the coffee that had grown cold. The waiter avoided my eyes. Nearly 2 hours later, Calvin emerged, his shirt splattered with water and grease, hands red and raw. Without a word, he stalked past me to the exit. I followed quietly, feeling the stares of remaining diners burning into my back. The silence in the borrowed car felt solid enough to touch. Calvin gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the road ahead. The city lights reflected off his damp face, whether from sweat or tears, I couldn't tell. Every traffic light was an eternity. Every stopped car an opportunity for him to explode. But he didn't. The silence was worse than any shouting. I searched for words, to explain, to justify, to comfort, but found none. What could I say? I'm sorry I embarrassed you would be a lie. I hope you learned something, would only pour salt on open wounds. So we drove through the Atlanta night, two strangers sharing blood and betrayal. When he pulled up to my house, I expected him to speed away the moment I closed the door. Instead, he cut the engine. I have to return the car, he said flatly. Need to call an Uber. I nodded, fishing keys from my purse with fingers that suddenly felt old and clumsy. You can wait inside. He followed me to the porch, maintaining a careful distance. As I unlocked the door, he cleared his throat. Is this how you get your kicks now? Humiliating me. The question hung in the air between us, loaded with hurt and accusation. No, Calvin, I said softly. This is how I stop enabling you to hurt yourself. His laugh was cold and sharp. Hurt myself? You're the one who set me up tonight. You're the one who let me sit there and look like a fool. You did that all on your own. His eyes narrowed. You know what? Forget the Uber. I'll walk. He turned and strode away into the darkness, shoulders hunched, each step vibrating with anger. I watched until he disappeared around the corner, then went inside, locked my door, and sank onto my couch. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. Sunday morning arrived with gray skies and a heaviness in my chest. I'd barely slept, replaying the restaurant scene in my mind, questioning my decision. Had I gone too far? Would this break something between us that could never be fixed? I was in my kitchen making tea when the front door slammed open so hard the family photos rattled on the wall. Calvin stood in the doorway, eyes bloodshot, still wearing last night's clothes. Good morning, I said quietly, my hand trembling around my mug. Good morning. He spat. That's what you have to say to me? After what you pulled? I took a deep breath. Would you like some coffee? I don't want your coffee. He stalked into the living room, pacing like a caged animal. Do you have any idea what happened after I left here? Had to walk 5 miles to a friend's place. 5 miles, Mom. And they weren't even home. I offered to let you wait inside, I reminded him. For what? So you could humiliate me more. He stopped pacing to face me. The waiter took pictures, Mom. Pictures. While I was scrubbing pots in that kitchen. It's probably all over social media by now. The guilt I'd been fighting resurfaced. I'm sorry that happened, but... Sorry. He laughed bitterly. You set me up. You could have told me you froze your card before the waiter came back. You wanted to watch me squirm. That's not true, I said, setting my mug down. I wanted you to face consequences for once in your life. You lied to me, Calvin. You invited me to dinner knowing you couldn't pay, expecting me to cover it like always. So what? You're my mother. Isn't that what mothers do? Take care of their children. You're 32 years old, not 12. Oh, here we go. He threw his hands up. Perfect Denise would never need help, right? Golden child never makes mistakes. But Calvin? He's the family screw-up. This isn't about Denise, I said firmly. This is about you consistently lying to me and using me for money. His face darkened. Using you? After everything I've put up with. Put up with? I echoed, genuinely confused. Yeah. Living with your constant disappointment. Your little sighs when I tell you about my projects. The way you compare me to Dad like I'll never measure up. I don't. You think I don't notice? Your father would have wanted. Your father never quit when things got hard. Well, I'm not him, am I? The conversation was veering into dangerous territory, but I couldn't stop it. No one expects you to be your father, I said. But he worked hard. He was responsible. He put his family first. Must be nice to remember him that way, Calvin sneered. All polished up and perfect now that he's dead. The word dead hung in the air like a slap. I flinched. Don't talk about your father that way, I warned, my voice dropping. Why not? Because it ruins your little fantasy? Dad wasn't perfect, Mom. He wasn't even that good. Know what he told me once? Said his biggest regret was settling down too young. My heart pounded painfully. He never said that. How would you know? You were always working. Always at the hospital. Meanwhile, he's telling his 14-year-old son that he missed out on life because of us. Stop it, Calvin. My hands were shaking now. No, you need to hear this. Dad was just like me, trapped in a life he never wanted. The only difference is I'm honest about it. He played along, being the dutiful husband, but inside? He was dying long before the cancer. Something snapped inside me. Not like the calculated decision at the restaurant. This was primal, protective, not of Calvin, but of Thomas and the love we'd shared. Your father loved us more than anything in this world, I said, my voice razor-sharp. He worked 2 jobs so I could get my nursing degree. He sat by your bed for 3 nights when you had pneumonia. He taught you to drive, helped you with homework, cheered at every game. Calvin rolled his eyes. Here comes St. Thomas again. No wonder he died young, I cut in, repeating his earlier words. Having to watch his son turn into this entitled, selfish man who blames everyone else for his failures. Calvin went still, his face draining of color. What did you just say? You heard me. And I'm done. I walked to the front door and opened it. Get out. He didn't move. You're kicking me out? Over a dinner bill? No. For disrespecting your father's memory. For lying to me repeatedly. For refusing to take responsibility for your own life. I love you, Calvin. But I won't watch you destroy yourself anymore. Fine. He grabbed his jacket from the couch. Call me when you're ready to apologize. I won't be calling. He paused at the doorway, finally sensing the finality in my voice. You don't mean that. You'll cave. You always do. I looked my son straight in the eyes. Not anymore. The door slammed behind him, rattling the family portraits once more. I stood in my suddenly quiet living room, feeling hollow and strangely light at the same time, like something poisonous had been drained from my body. For 32 years, I'd been Calvin's safety net. Today, I'd cut the strings. 3 weeks passed without a word. We've all faced that moment where love requires letting go. What would you have done? The first week after Calvin left, I jumped every time my phone rang. Each knock at the door sent my heart racing. But it was never him. My house felt eerily quiet. For years, my life had revolved around Calvin's crises. His calls for money, his problems that needed solving, his constant drama. Now that vacuum of need left me disoriented, like a sailor who'd lost her North Star. Denise came over that first weekend, casserole in hand as usual. She found me sorting through old photo albums, lingering over pictures of Calvin as a child, gap-toothed smiles and baseball uniforms, before the lying started. "Mom, you did the right thing," she said, sitting beside me on the couch. "It was long overdue." "Then why does it feel so awful?" I asked, tracing Calvin's 5-year-old face with my fingertip. She wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "Because you're a good mother. Good mothers don't enjoy watching their children struggle. But sometimes it's necessary." At night, doubt crept in. Had I been too harsh? What if he was truly in trouble? What if he needed me and I'd closed the door? I'd check my phone, my email, even my old Facebook account. Nothing. By the second week, something unexpected happened. I started sleeping better. The constant knot of anxiety in my stomach began to loosen. I found myself humming while watering my plants. Small things, but they felt like miracles. I joined a book club at the local library, something I'd always wanted to do but never found time for between work and Calvin's emergencies. I reconnected with Dorothy, my old friend from the hospital who'd retired the year before me. We started walking in the park 3 mornings a week. "You look younger," she told me over coffee after our walk. "Like you've dropped a heavy load." "I've dropped something," I admitted. "But I'm not sure if it's a load or my heart." The third week brought an unexpected revelation. I ran into Calvin's friend Maurice at the grocery store. He avoided eye contact, quickly turning down another aisle. I followed him. "Maurice," I said, catching up by the frozen foods. "How is he?" Maurice looked uncomfortable. "He's managing, Miss Harris." "Has he found a job yet?" His eyebrows rose. "Calvin told everyone you kicked him out because he wouldn't give you money for your gambling problem." My hand gripped the shopping cart. "My what?" "Said you've been losing your retirement money at the casino, that he's been trying to help you but you won't admit you have a problem." The pain of this new lie was sharp and clean. Calvin hadn't just been using me. He'd been creating a narrative where he was the responsible one, the long-suffering son. "Thank you for telling me," I said quietly. That evening, I called Denise and told her what I'd learned. "Are you surprised?" she asked gently. "No," I admitted. "Just disappointed." "He'll run out of friends to mooch off eventually," she said. "When people compare his stories to what they see with their own eyes, they'll figure it out." I hung up feeling strangely calm. The guilt that had plagued me was fading, replaced by a sad clarity. My son was a grown man making his own choices. Poor ones perhaps, but his own. I was learning to live my life without orbiting his chaos. I was rediscovering myself, not just as Calvin's mother or Thomas's widow, but as Lorraine. Then came the call I never expected. It was Tuesday afternoon. I was deadheading my geraniums on the porch when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Normally I'd let it go to voicemail, assuming it was another scam call. Something made me answer. "Is this Lorraine Harris?" A woman's professional voice, slightly hurried. "Yes, this is she. I'm calling from Grady Memorial Hospital. We have your son, Calvin Harris, in our emergency department. You're listed as his emergency contact." My garden shears clattered to the porch floor. "What happened? Is he?" "He's stable," she assured me quickly. "But he's asking for you. That's all I can say over the phone." The 15-minute drive to Grady took 9 minutes. My hands shook on the steering wheel as worst-case scenarios flooded my mind. Car accident? Assault? Alcohol poisoning? The emergency room was crowded with the usual urban chaos: crying babies, elderly patients in wheelchairs, security guards watching everyone with tired eyes. I gave Calvin's name at the desk and was directed through double doors to Bay 14. I didn't recognize him at first. The man on the hospital gurney looked smaller than my son, his face gaunt beneath a scraggly beard. His eyes were sunken, surrounded by dark circles. And 4 ran into his left arm. A heart monitor beeped steadily beside him. "Calvin." My voice came out as a whisper. His eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly. "Ma," he croaked, lips cracked and dry. I rushed to his side, maternal instinct overriding everything else. "What happened to you?" A doctor appeared at the foot of the bed before he could answer. "Mrs. Harris? I'm Dr. Patel. Your son was brought in by ambulance after collapsing at a gas station. He's severely dehydrated, malnourished, and has early signs of pneumonia." I looked from the doctor to my son. "Malnourished? Calvin, where have you been staying?" "Eating." He turned his face away, but not before I caught the shame in his expression. According to his intake form, Dr. Patel continued, glancing at a tablet, "He's been living in his car for the past 2 weeks." My hand flew to my mouth. "His car?" The doctor nodded grimly. "We've started antibiotics for the pneumonia, fluids for dehydration, and nutritional supplements. He should recover physically with proper care, but..." The unspoken concern hung in the air. The physical problems were just symptoms of something deeper. "Thank you, doctor," I said. "May I have a moment with my son?" When we were alone, I pulled a chair close to Calvin's bed. "Talk to me," I said simply. His story came out in halting fragments, punctuated by coughing fits. After our fight, he'd stayed with friends until he'd worn out his welcome. 1 week here, 3 days there. The lies about my gambling had backfired when someone offered to help him stage an intervention for me. He'd bounced between cheap motels until his money ran out, then started sleeping in his car, parked in different lots each night to avoid security. "Couldn't get hired anywhere," he mumbled. "Not looking like this. Not without a shower." "Why didn't you call me?" I asked, fighting to keep accusation from my voice. "Pride." He laughed bitterly, triggering another cough. "Stupid pride. Thought I'd figure something out. Always do, right? But then I got sick. Couldn't stop coughing. Couldn't think straight." I studied my son, really looked at him. Beyond the physical deterioration, something in his eyes had changed. The slick charm was gone, replaced by a raw vulnerability I hadn't seen since he was very young. "Mom," he whispered, reaching for my hand with cold fingers. "I've been lying for so long, I don't even know who I am anymore. I tell people what they want to hear. I promise things I can't deliver. I use people until they catch on, then move to the next target." His voice broke. "I don't want to be this person anymore." Tears filled my eyes. Was this genuine realization or another performance? The cynical part of me, The part that had frozen my credit card that night remained wary. But the mother in me wanted desperately to believe. "The doctor says you need time to recover," I said carefully. "I have nowhere to go." His admission hung between us, fragile and honest. I took a deep breath. "You can stay with me until you're back on your feet. But things will be different this time, Calvin. I mean it." Relief flooded his face, followed by uncertainty. Different how? What he asked me next would test everything I believed about motherhood. Would you take back someone who broke your heart? The answer isn't always what you think. Different how? Calvin repeated when I didn't immediately answer. I straightened in the hospital chair, summoning strength I wasn't sure I had. "If you come home, there will be conditions. Non-negotiable ones." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Like what?" "You'll contribute to household expenses. Not what you think you can afford, a fixed percentage of whatever you earn." I ticked off the first point on my finger. "You'll attend weekly financial counseling sessions at the community center. You'll apply for a minimum of 5 jobs every day until you're employed." "Mom, I'm not finished." My voice remained calm but firm. "Your phone stays in the kitchen at night. No secret calls or transactions. You'll help with household chores without being asked. And most importantly, you'll be honest with me. Always. One lie, just one, and you're out." His jaw tightened. "So I'm basically on parole in my own mother's house." "No, Calvin. You're a grown man being offered temporary shelter with reasonable expectations." I reached for his hand. "This isn't punishment. It's a pathway to becoming the person I know you can be." The doctor released him 2 days later with prescriptions and follow-up appointments. The drive home was quiet, Calvin staring out the window at the Atlanta streets like he was seeing them for the first time. The first week was the hardest. Calvin bristled at the structure, the accountability, the lack of privacy. He'd snap when I asked to see job applications, stomp around when I reminded him about dishwashing duty. The old pattern threatened to reassert itself. His anger, my capitulation. But I held firm. "These are the conditions," I repeated calmly when he pushed back. "You're free to leave if they don't work for you." By week 2, something shifted. Maybe it was the steady meals, the warm bed, the security of 4 walls that weren't made of metal and glass. Or maybe it was simply having nowhere else to go. Calvin began applying for jobs without reminders. He cleaned the kitchen without being asked. Small changes, but seismic in what they represented. "He's manipulating you," Denise warned during our weekly call. "He knows which buttons to push." "Maybe," I acknowledged. "But this feels different." The breakthrough came in his 3rd week home. I found Calvin at the kitchen table surrounded by papers, calculator in hand. "What's all this?" I asked. "My debt," he said quietly. "All of it. Credit cards, personal loans, money I owe friends. I'm calculating what I need to earn to make minimum payments while still contributing here." It wasn't the amount that shocked me, though the total was staggering. It was the honesty. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, Calvin was facing reality without filters or fantasy. By month 2, he'd secured a job at a warehouse distribution center. Not glamorous, not in the music industry, but steady employment with benefits. The first Friday after his paycheck cleared, he handed me a sealed envelope. "What's this?" I asked. 30% of my check. For rent and utilities, like we agreed. I opened it, counting the bills with trembling fingers. It wasn't much, but it represented something priceless, a promise kept. Month 3 brought his first promotion to shift leader. Month 4, he enrolled in online classes for business administration. By month 5, He'd started repaying his debts, smallest to largest, following the plan from his financial counselor. "You look good, little brother," Denise said during her first dinner with us since his return. The caution in her voice had softened, though skepticism lingered in her eyes. "Feel good," Calvin replied, passing her the salad bowl. "First time in a long time." Most remarkable was what didn't happen. No mysterious late-night calls. No sudden emergencies requiring money. No elaborate stories about imminent success just around the corner. Instead, small truths. "I'm tired today. This job is harder than I thought. I'm scared I'll mess up again." One evening, I found him looking at old family photos, the same ones I'd been poring over after our fight. "Dad would be disappointed in how I turned out," he said, not looking up. I sat beside him. "Your father would be proud of who you're becoming." He glanced at me, eyes shining. "Do you think I can stay on this path?" "That's entirely up to you," I answered. "But I believe you can." The most powerful moment came when I overheard him on the phone with a friend who'd clearly offered him an easy money scheme. "Nah man, I'm good," Calvin said firmly. "I'm building something here. Something real." 6 months later, we returned to that same restaurant. 6 months later, we returned to that same restaurant. The crystal room looked just as elegant, the chandeliers still sparkling overhead. But everything else had changed. Calvin held the door for me, dressed in a simple but clean button-down shirt. No flashy accessories, no cologne cloud surrounding him. Just my son, clear-eyed and present. "Table for two," he told the host. "Reservation under Harris." We were seated at a different table, thankfully not the one that had witnessed our humiliation. The menus still had no prices, but this time, Calvin ordered modestly. "Just water for me," he said. "And we'll share an appetizer to start." When the bill came, he reached for it without hesitation, placing his debit card, a real one, from a legitimate bank account, in the leather folder. "I've been saving for this," he explained. "Wanted to replace that memory with a better one." The waiter returned, smiling. "All set, sir. Thank you for dining with us." As we walked to the car, Calvin's car, now properly registered and insured, he paused. "That night changed everything, Mom. I hated you for it at the time. But it was exactly what I needed." I squeezed his hand. "Love isn't always gentle, Calvin. Sometimes it's standing firm when everything in you wants to give in." The truth is, freezing my card that night was the hardest thing I'd ever done, and the most necessary. It shattered the destructive pattern we'd built over decades. It forced us both to face uncomfortable truths. And in that shattering, it created space for something healthier to grow. My son isn't perfect now. Neither am I. We're both works in progress, learning and relearning how to love each other without enabling harmful behaviors. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give those we love is the gift of consequences. Does family loyalty have limits? Tell us your thoughts and where you're watching from.